It was still early in the morning. Sandra stood at the edge of the road, glancing around nervously as she clutched the small, bony wrists of the two little girls beside her, Ellie and Eliana, just 3 years old. Their tiny bodies were covered in hand-woven clothes, torn in several places, their hair knotted with dirt, and their faces dull and tired. The twin girls looked confused. "Auntie, where are we going?" Ellie whispered. "Shut up," Sandra hissed. "You talk too much." Eliana, holding her twin sister's hand tightly, trembled in silence. At the corner of the street near the garbage dump, a man sat hunched over. He looked dirty, with long dreadlocks, torn slippers, and a thick faded coat. His beard was rough and wild. Beside him was a sack that looked like it held everything he owned. Sandra marched up to him like a woman possessed. "You, take these children," she muttered quickly, almost spitting the words out. "I don't care what you do with them. Sell them. Eat them. I don't care." The man slowly lifted his head. His eyes, though tired and dusty, were calm. Too calm. "What are their names?" he asked in a deep voice. "Do I look like I care?" she snapped. "Just take them. And here." She held out her hand, palm up. "Give me something. Anything." The man reached into his coat pocket and brought out a crumpled $5 bill. Sandra snatched it like a prize, shoved the twins forward, and walked away without looking back. "Where is Daddy?" Ellie cried. "Are you our new uncle?" Eliana asked softly, tears lining her eyes. The man stood up, brushed his coat, and gave the twins a soft smile. "No, little ones," he said gently. "From today, I'll be your new father." Just then, a black Mercedes SUV pulled up quietly beside them. The back door opened. A well-dressed driver stepped out and bowed slightly. "Sir, everything is ready," the driver said. The so-called homeless man picked up both girls and whispered, "You'll never suffer again." He placed them in the back seat. The girls stared in awe at the shining car, the soft leather seats, and the man who suddenly didn't seem so poor anymore. As the car drove off, the man pulled out his phone. "It's done," he said calmly. "Prepare the guest wing, call the pediatrician, and tell the nannies to get the girls' rooms ready." His name was Mr. Andrew Okafor, CEO of Andrew Cooperatives, one of Nigeria's largest conglomerates. But no one knew that. Not even Sandra. Back at the compound, Sandra returned home quickly and locked the gate behind her. She waited a few minutes, then burst out of the house screaming, "Help! Somebody help! My husband's twins, Ellie and Billionaire, gone. I left to buy something in the market, and when I came back, they had disappeared." Her cries pierced the quiet morning, drawing neighbors out of their houses in confusion. "Gone?" one woman gasped. "They were just here last night," said another. A few people ran up and down the street, shouting the twins' names. But deep down, most of them didn't believe her story. They had seen how Sandra treated the girls, the beatings, the shouting, the times she threw away their food or made them sleep outside. Everyone knew, but no one had solid proof. Later that day, Jonathan returned. His eyes were red. His hands shook as he dropped his travel bag. "Where are my children?" he asked. Sandra collapsed on the floor, crying and rolling in fake agony. "They're gone. I went to the market and came back. They were gone." Jonathan stood still, frozen, in disbelief. His eyes wandered to the kitchen door, the same place Amanda had died just 3 months ago, poisoned. His heart ached again. First, his wife. Now, her children. Jonathan could still remember how this trouble started. He married Amanda as his second wife, despite his first wife, Sandra's disapproval. Sandra had made Jonathan promise not to take another wife when they got married 10 years ago. But Jonathan claimed he only agreed because he didn't know he'd meet someone as wonderful as Amanda. Sandra never accepted Amanda and threatened to get rid of her. After having only one son, George, Sandra couldn't have more children. Jonathan tried various solutions, including visiting native doctors, before marrying Amanda. When Amanda became pregnant with twins, Sandra felt threatened, thinking Jonathan would favor her. Sandra tried to harm Amanda while she was pregnant, but neighbors intervened. After the twins, Ellie and Eliana, were born, Sandra became more bittered due to the attention Jonathan gave them. When Jonathan traveled for work, Amanda asked Sandra to help cook. It became the worst mistake of Amanda, as Sandra poisoned the food, leading to Amanda's death. The neighbors suspected foul play, especially since Amanda had been holding her stomach and foaming at the mouth before dying. Jonathan returned to find Amanda dead and suspected Sandra, but couldn't confront her. 3 months later, Jonathan traveled again, asking Sandra to care for the twins and see them as her own children. However, when he returned, the twins were gone without a trace. Jonathan knew Sandra was likely responsible but didn't dare accuse her. He was now faced with the challenge of explaining the disappearance of his twins, just months after his second wife's mysterious death. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, Jonathan said, crying profusely. But Sandra had no idea. She had just handed over the children to a man she believed was useless and desperate. What she didn't know was that man was watching her now through a secret camera installed in his car's dashboard, reviewing everything she said and did at that moment. Mr. Andrew leaned back in his luxurious home office, staring at the screen, his expression unreadable. "These children," he whispered to himself, "will rise." That same night, as Sandra stepped out to buy bread, a woman in a black SUV pulled up beside her, handed her a white envelope, and drove off without a word. Inside the envelope was a photo of Ellie and Eliana, wearing brand new clothes, smiling wide, in front of a mansion. On the back was written in bold letters, "You gave them away. We gave them wings." Sandra's hands began to shake, and for the first time, she was truly afraid. Sandra couldn't sleep that night. She sat at the edge of her bed, clutching the photo like it might burst into flames. Her hands shook, her breath shallow. The smiling faces of Ellie and Eliana haunted her, and the mansion behind them so elegant, so grand made her heart pound. She had sold them to a homeless man at a refuse dump. How were they now in fine clothes, in front of a mansion? She stood suddenly, locked the door, and shut the curtains tight. Her mind spun. Who was that man? How did he find such a place? Was he a kidnapper, a ritualist, or worse, someone rich enough to come after her? But there were no answers, and for the first time in her life, Sandra, who once walked with pride and power, felt like the smallest person in the world. Meanwhile, Ellie and Eliana were already fast asleep in their new beds. Not straw mats on a cold floor, but fluffy mattresses with pillows bigger than their heads, and pink bedsheets covered in cartoon stars. Each had their own bedroom. Each had a nanny. Each had had their first warm bath in weeks. Mr. Andrew stood in the hallway watching the security camera feed from their rooms. "Doctor says they're slightly malnourished, but okay overall," said his assistant, Ada, walking in with a tablet in hand. "They'll be fine with regular meals and care." Andrew nodded slowly. "Did they ask anything about their parents?" "They asked if they'll ever see their father again," Ada said softly. Andrew took a deep breath and nodded. "One day, but not now." He walked over to the glass window and stared at the garden below. "You know," he said quietly, "the first time I saw them, something broke in me. Something I thought died the day I lost my wife and my 2 kids in that crash." Ada looked up, her eyes softening. "They look just like Chiamaka and Ife," Andrew whispered. "Same small hands, same big eyes." Ada touched his shoulder. "Then maybe God brought them for a reason." Months passed. The girls blossomed. Ellie became talkative, curious about everything. She wanted to know how planes flew, how water became rain, and why stars shined at night. Eliana was quieter, always drawing, always watching. But she smiled more now. She laughed with the staff and hugged the nannies often. They started school. Andrew enrolled them in one of the best schools in Lagos. Uniforms were tailored, lunchboxes were packed with care, and drivers were assigned to pick and drop them. Within weeks, their teachers were amazed. "These girls are gifted," one teacher told Andrew during the first parent-teacher meeting. "Ellie is always top of the class in science and math. Eliana? She's an artist in the making." Andrew smiled, heart full. From then on, he didn't just become a guardian. He became a father again. He taught them how to ride bicycles. He read bedtime stories. He attended their school plays, cheered at their inter-house sports, and celebrated every little win. On their 5th birthday, he threw them a party with bouncing castles, cupcakes, and lots of fun. And when they asked for cake with their mum's name on it, he wrote, "For Amanda, the mama of angels." The guests clapped. Andrew cried quietly in the corner, but far away, Jonathan was breaking. He stopped going to work. He sat under the mango tree at the back of his house every evening, staring into the distance. His carpentry tools gathered dust. People whispered, "That man has lost everything." And it was true. His once strong voice was now weak. His eyes looked empty. Every time he heard twins laughing in the neighborhood, his heart stopped. He still remembered Amanda's last words, "Promise me you'll love them." And he failed. He failed to protect them. One evening, he walked to Sandra's room. "I want to ask you again," he said quietly. "Where are my daughters?" Sandra stiffened. "I've told you 100 times. They disappeared when I went to the market." Jonathan's lips trembled, but he didn't shout. He just nodded, turned around, and left. That night, as she peeked from the window, Sandra saw him walking barefoot down the street. He didn't come back until morning. 7 years later, the mansion was full of music and laughter. Ellie and Eliana had just graduated as the top 2 students in their secondary school. Both wore navy blue gowns with golden sashes that read, "Valedictorian." Andrew stood between them, dressed in native attire, clapping proudly. Cameras flashed. Reporters smiled. Scholarships were already rolling in for the brilliant twins. The twins had chosen to become pilots. "We want to fly, Daddy," Ellie had once said. "We want to go where no one can ever cage us again," Eliana added. Andrew gave them everything, and few years after they became pilots, they were flying. With the support of their adopted father, Ellie and Eliana achieved their dreams, living their best lives which they never imagined could be possible. But one day, as they returned from a dinner banquet, their driver slowed down near a market. A weak, tired-looking man stood in the middle of the road, waving at cars. Ellie looked closely. "Stop," she said suddenly. The car halted. The man turned. It was Jonathan, their father. He hadn't changed much. Still lean, still tired, but now with few grey hairs. But his eyes widened when he saw them. "My children," he gasped. Eliana stepped out, unsure. Ellie followed. "Daddy?" Ellie said, her voice shaking. "Yes," Jonathan said, falling to his knees. "Yes, it's me. I looked for you everywhere. I never stopped." Andrew had told them the truth 2 weeks ago, that their father never gave them away, that he left them in someone else's care, and that it was Sandra who betrayed them. Eliana's hands curled into fists. Ellie started crying. "You didn't protect us," she whispered. "You knew Sandra hated us. You left us with her. I had to work. I didn't know. Please, I'm sorry," he begged, tears falling. Eliana turned to walk away. Ellie stood still. "I forgive you, Daddy, but we're not little girls anymore." And they drove off in silence. A week later, a call came in. Sandra had been hit by a bus while returning from market. She was in critical condition and needed $10,000 for surgery or she would die. Ellie looked at the report and said, "We can't let her die." Eliana slammed her hand on the table. "She deserves to suffer." Their faces burned with the memories, the hunger, the beatings, the day she sold them for $5. The room went quiet. And now, a decision had to be made. The mansion was quiet that morning, but inside the dining hall, emotions were boiling. Ellie sat on the edge of her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of her juice glass, her face pale and worried. Eliana paced across the room with crossed arms, stopping every few seconds to glare at the tablet on the table. On the screen was a medical report from Lagos General Hospital, and beneath it, a message. Patient name, Sandra Okoro. Status, critical. Head trauma. Internal bleeding. Requires immediate surgical intervention. Estimated cost, $10,000. Eliana snapped. "Why are we even talking about this?" Ellie looked up slowly. Because she's dying, Ella. And no matter what she did, she's still human. Eliana's jaw clenched. Human? You call that monster human? Her voice cracked. She poisoned our mother, Ellie. She starved us, beat us, stripped us of our names, our dignity. She sold us. Like garbage. She was broken, Ellie said softly. She was evil, yes, but I don't want us to become like her. I don't want to repay hate with more hate. We must not let her evil define who we are. Eliana's voice lowered, almost a whisper. So we just save her? Pay the huge amount and pretend it never happened? No, Ellie said, standing. We save her because we can, but we don't forget. Later that day, Andrew walked into the lounge where the girls were seated. He had been following the updates silently but knew this was a decision he couldn't make for them. You've made up your minds? He asked gently. Ellie nodded. Yes. Eliana didn't speak, but her arms were folded tightly across her chest, her face unreadable. We'll pay for the surgery, Ellie said. Andrew placed a hand on her shoulder. That's very big of you. But after that, Ellie added, we're done. We don't want her in our lives. No visits, no letters, no apologies. Andrew gave a slow, respectful nod. I'll make the arrangements. 3 days later, Sandra's surgery was done and its success. The doctors were amazed that the money came in so quickly, and even more shocked when they found out it came from Ellie and Eliana Okoro, two of the most promising young pilots in Nigeria. When Sandra woke up, groggy from the anesthesia, her sister was beside her. God gave you another chance, the sister whispered. You better not waste it. Sandra didn't speak. She just stared blankly at the ceiling, the images of Ellie and Eliana flashing in her mind like a cruel joke from the universe. It was hard to believe the girls she hated so much and sold out years ago were the ones that paid for her surgery and save her life. She cried and wished she could see them and beg for forgiveness. Weeks passed. Sandra was discharged and returned home, walking with a slight limp and wearing a neck brace. Her old friends avoided her. Her market customers stopped greeting her. Even George, her only son, had gone silent. He hadn't called in weeks. She was alone. She tried calling the twins to beg for their forgiveness. The number was blocked. She wrote letters. They were returned, unopened. She visited Andrew Cooperative's headquarters and was turned away at the gate. She even sat outside Sunshine Aviation Training Center, where the girls were undergoing final pilot certification, hoping for a glimpse. Nothing. One night, Sandra sat in her living room, staring at the same photo she had once received mysteriously in an envelope. The twin so bright, so happy. Tears rolled down her face. I did this, she muttered to herself. I created this pain. Her fingers trembled as she held her old phone, looking at an unsent voice note. I'm sorry. I was jealous. I thought Jonathan would stop loving me. I thought Amanda took everything. I didn't know I would lose everything. But she never hit send. Meanwhile, the twins continued flying, living their best lives as youngest pilots in the country. Ellie landed a Boeing 737 with elegance and accuracy. Her instructors clapped. She cried tears of joy. A week later, Eliana followed and passed with flying colors. News of the twins' achievement made headlines. From orphan twins to Nigeria's youngest certified pilots, the story of Ellie and Eliana Okoro. Social media exploded. They were invited to speak at youth conferences. They were named ambassadors for the Girl Child Initiative. And their story, though painful, became a beacon of hope. But one question kept following them. Will you ever forgive your stepmother? Ellie always answered, forgiveness is not weakness, but we choose peace over reunion. Eliana would just smile tightly and say nothing, but fate wasn't done yet. One rainy morning, Sandra stepped out of her compound carrying umbrella in hand, heading to a small market across the road. She didn't see the truck. The driver tried to brake. Horns screamed. It was too late. Sandra was hit hard and thrown across the road. Her umbrella flew into the air. Passers-by screamed. Blood pooled around her. The driver didn't stop. She died on the spot. News broke within hours. Ellie and Eliana saw the notification while sitting at the living room. Former trader Sandra Okoro struck and killed in road accident. They looked at each other, stunned into silence. Neither spoke for a long while. Ellie finally said, "We should go." For closure. Sandra was buried quietly, a small wooden coffin, few mourners, no flowers. But among the few that came, two women stood out dressed in sharp black suits, hats covering their faces, their eyes hidden behind dark shades. Ellie and Eliana. They said nothing throughout the service. They stood still, and when the casket was lowered, Ellie whispered, "Rest, Sandra. We let go of the pain." Eliana nodded slowly but didn't speak. Their father, Jonathan, had long distanced himself from Sandra and didn't attend her burial. As they turned to leave, a neighbor approached. "She never stopped talking about you two," the woman said softly. "She carried that guilt till her last breath." The twins walked back to their car, stepping through the soft mud, hand in hand. They didn't look back. That evening, after returning home, Ellie found a sealed letter slipped under their mansion gate. It was from George Sandra's only son. It read, "You may have buried her, but this isn't over. You think you won because you're rich and famous? Watch your back. You don't know what family secrets she took to her grave." Eliana grabbed the letter, eyes narrowing. "Looks like the past isn't done with us yet." The storm rolled in that night, thick clouds covering the moon, like a dark secret hiding in plain sight. Rain tapped on the windows of Andrew's mansion as Ellie stood frozen, rereading the letter from George. "Watch your back. You don't know what family secrets she took to her grave." Eliana snatched it again, pacing. "He's threatening us." Ellie shook her head slowly. "Or he's warning us." Andrew stepped into the room just then, having read their faces before they even spoke. "What's going on?" he asked calmly. Ellie handed him the letter. As his eyes scanned the note, his brow furrowed. "George," he murmured. "Sandra's son?" Eliana folded her arms. "Yes. Apparently, he blames us for his mother's death." "He should be blaming her for what she did to us," Ellie said quietly. Andrew handed the note back. "Either way, we need to be careful. If he's unstable, we report this. If there's any truth to this family secret, we find out first." The next morning, the twins drove to the old compound where their story began. The gate was rusted. The paint had peeled. The mango tree they once cried under still stood taller, wider, but unchanged. A neighbor recognized them and ran out. "Ellie? Eliana? Is that really you two?" She hugged them with trembling arms, tears gathering in her eyes. "You girls grew wings. May God bless that man who saved you." They smiled politely and asked the woman about George. "Since your mother's burial," she said, "he's been acting strange. Always talking to himself. Keeps saying she didn't die alone, that if anyone finds out what she did, everything would collapse." "What did he mean?" Ellie asked, heart pounding. "I don't know," the neighbor said. "But you should talk to Mama Dora." Mama Dora. She was an old woman, one of the oldest in the neighborhood, known for knowing everything. They found her sitting by a charcoal pot, roasting plantains. "Twins," she greeted them, with a toothy smile. "You've returned." Eliana sat beside her. "We need to ask about Sandra." The old woman sighed. Sandra was bitter, but there's something she swore me to keep before she died. I didn't think it mattered. Until now." Ellie leaned in. "What is it?" Mama Dora lowered her voice. "Your father, Jonathan. He's not just a carpenter." The girls blinked. "What do you mean?" "He's the son of a man who owned half the land in this community. Chief Nathaniel Okoro, your grandfather. But Jonathan ran away when he was younger, after fighting with his father over inheritance. He changed his identity, became a carpenter." Ellie's voice was barely a whisper. "So, our father is the rightful heir to Chief Nathaniel's estate?" Mama Dora finished. "Hundreds of millions, large lands, and shares in an oil company. but he never claimed it. The girls stared at each other. Eliana asked. And Sandra knew. Mama Dora nodded. She found out just before Amanda died. That's why she did it. She thought if Amanda gave birth to Sonstwins, especially, they would one day claim it all. She didn't want that. She wanted George to inherit everything. Ellie felt the weight of it all slam into her chest. She tried to kill us, not just out of jealousy, but to wipe out our bloodline. Mama Dora nodded slowly. She wanted her son to be the only one standing. Back at the mansion, Andrew listened silently as the twins shared everything. He stood, walked to the window, and said, "This changes everything." "We need to talk to Dad," Ellie said. "He doesn't even know we know," Eliana muttered. "He's been through too much." Andrew turned. "No, he needs to know. You girls deserve the truth and your name." 2 days later, they arranged to meet Jonathan at a quiet garden restaurant in Victoria Island. He arrived looking older than they remembered. His eyes filled with tears the moment he saw them. "Thank you," he whispered. "For the surgery. For giving me a second chance." Ellie nodded slowly. "We didn't just come here for that." Eliana leaned forward. "We want to know the truth." Jonathan looked up. "Who is Chief Nathaniel Okoro to you?" Ellie asked. Jonathan went pale. For a long time, he said nothing. Then finally, he sighed. "He was my father. He told them everything. How he left the village in anger, changed his name, and started over as a carpenter. How he hid his past from everyone, including Amanda, and how Sandra somehow found out and held it over his head. I didn't want to be like him," Jonathan said softly. "I wanted a simple life, but I didn't know Sandra would turn it into a weapon." The girls sat quietly. Then Ellie reached for his hand. "You don't have to hide anymore." Meanwhile, George sat in a dark room, flipping through old documents his mother kept in a locked box. He found a forged will, land documents, a photo of Amanda crossed out in red ink. His face twisted in anger. "First, they took my mother. Now they want to take everything else." He pulled out his phone and made a call. A man answered on the other end. "It's time," George said. "I want to make them pay." Late at night, Andrew's mansion security alarm went off. Guards rushed to the gate. Weapons were drawn. At the foot of the gate was a dead animal, and a note tied to its leg. The note read, "The bloodline war has just begun. G." Inside, Ellie and Eliana stood by the window, faces lit by the flashing red security lights. Eliana turned slowly. "He's not just angry anymore." Ellie's voice shook. "He's dangerous." The mansion was locked down, every gate sealed, every camera checked. Armed guards paced the perimeter with flashlights. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The twins sat in Andrew's study beside their father, Jonathan, while Andrew stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the rain fall just like it did on the day they were abandoned. On the table lay the note, "The bloodline war has just begun. G." Jonathan looked down, shaking his head. "I never thought George would go this far." Eliana clenched her fists. "We knew he hated us, but now he's making threats. This is different." Andrew turned around slowly. "This isn't just anger. He's digging up everything Sandra buried, and if he's using it to target you, we need to act first." The next morning, Andrew contacted a team of private investigators. Within 48 hours, they returned with a full report. George had emptied all his late mother's savings. He'd met with a corrupt lawyer trying to challenge the Okoro family inheritance. And he was gathering dangerous Menex convicts and paid informants willing to do anything for a price. But one name stood out. Barrister Kunle Falana, a man once disbarred for forgery, now secretly helping George build a case against the twins, and Jonathan claiming they faked their identities to steal Sandra's rightful inheritance. It was a lie. But in this country, with the wrong people in power, a lie could become law. 1 week later, Ellie and Eliana were invited to speak at a global youth aviation conference in Abuja. Andrew hesitated. "It's a public event. Cameras. Crowds. You'll be exposed." "We can't live in fear," Ellie said firmly. "We've worked for this. We show up strong." Eliana added, "and if he dares to try anything in public, we'll have witnesses." They flew with a private security detail. The conference was a success. The girls received standing ovations. Newspapers hailed them. The Sky Sisters, Ellie and Eliana, inspire a new generation of aviators. But behind the applause, danger lurked. It happened just as they stepped out of the conference center. A black van sped toward them. The security team reacted, fast shielding the twins, drawing weapons. The van screeched to a halt, and 3 men jumped out wearing masks. But they weren't fast enough. One man grabbed Eliana by the arm. Before he could pull her, Ellie swung her bag and hit him across the face. A guard tackled him to the ground, while another fired a warning shot in the air. The other 2 fled. There was a loud scream by the crowd. Sirens blared. The police arrived in minutes. The man captured turned out to be a known associate of George. After the attack, George went into hiding. Barrister Kunle was arrested for possession of forged legal documents. Ellie and Eliana were taken to a safe location under police protection. Inside the villa, Eliana cried for the first time in years. "I was so close to being gone again." Ellie held her tightly. "We made it. We always will." Andrew brought in a legal team. "From now on," he said, "we're not just going to protect your lives. We're going to protect your legacy." Weeks later, in a Lagos federal high court filled with spectators, the full truth came out. Jonathan was confirmed the legitimate son of Chief Nathaniel Okoro. The family estate, assets, and name were restored legally. Ellie and Eliana were officially named as heirs to the Okoro legacy. George was tried for attempted kidnapping and conspiracy. As he stood in the dock, chained and bitter, his eyes met the twins. "You think you won?" he spat. Eliana stepped forward. "We didn't win. We survived. And we forgave," Ellie added. "But we will never forget." The judge gave a stern sentence. 20 years without parole. George was sentenced, and just like his mother, his evil couldn't break the twins. As he was taken away from the court by the prison officer, he turned back for the last time, looked at Ellie and Eliana, and threatened to come back and deal with them. But the twins only laughed and believed 20 years was more than enough to realize his mistakes. 6 months later, peace returned. The twins began flying internationally co-piloting for one of Africa's biggest airlines. Andrew retired and started a foundation in Amanda's name to help abandoned children find safe homes. Jonathan opened a carpentry school to train young boys in memory of his humble past. And Ellie and Eliana, they built a school in their mother's name, the Amanda Academy, for orphaned girls. Inside Amanda Academy, dozens of young girls in sky blue uniforms ran across the playground. Ellie and Eliana stood beneath the mango tree, the one where they once cried as forgotten children. Eliana whispered, "We came back stronger." Ellie nodded. Not because of what we went through, but because of who we chose to become. As they turned to walk inside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the school sign. But before they leave, the mood changed. Eliana picked her call, and what she heard broke every efforts they've made to have a lasting peace. Ellie quickly asked her sister, "What's happening?" "It's George. A friend who worked at the prison just told me he had escaped from the prison, and you know what that means." Ellie couldn't believe her ears. She didn't know whether to cause the bad system of the country or cry for help. What do you think will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to watch the part 2 when we upload it. Where are you watching from?